The closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I woke up at 4 a.m. I sat in the dark. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law. "Are you excited? This is going to change everything. We're so proud of you." I didn't answer any of them. At 6 a.m., I made the call. Not to the lawyers. Not to the investors. To my sister. I said, "I'm not signing." She said, "What do you mean you're not signing?" I said, "I mean I'm not taking the deal. It's not right. The numbers don't work. The people involved are not who they say they are. And if I sign, I'm signing away more than money. I'm signing away knowing I did the right thing." She screamed at me for 20 minutes. "You're ruining us. Everyone was counting on you. I'll never forgive you for this." I listened. I didn't argue. When she was done, I said, "I love you. I'm not signing." I hung up. That was the last time I said yes to them. Not yes to the deal. Yes to caring what they thought. After that call, I stopped. The deal died. The family's dreams died with it. No one ever thanked me for walking away from something that would have destroyed us all. They just stopped talking to me. That was the gift they didn't know they gave me. Permission to stop. My name is Mark. I was 41 when the deal came through a former colleague. Real estate development. A piece of land that was undervalued because of a title issue everyone else was too scared to untangle. Investors lined up. The math was complicated but promising. I was supposed to be the lead, the one who signed, the one who took the risk, the one who would benefit most, and also the one who would lose most if it failed. I told my family about the deal in the early stages, not because I needed their input, because I was excited. I had spent years building my reputation, years saying yes to smaller things, years being the reliable one. This was supposed to be my reward. I said this could be big. My sister heard this will save me. My mother heard this will fix everything. I didn't correct them. I didn't know I needed to. I didn't know that their hope was a weight I would be carrying alone. The deal grew. More investors, more money, more pressure. My sister started calling weekly, then daily. She had a number in her head. What her share would be, what she would pay off, what she would finally be free of. Medical bills from her husband's illness. Credit card debt from the years she couldn't work because she was caring for him. A mortgage on a house that was falling apart. She never asked if I was sure. She just assumed. Assumed the numbers would hold. Assumed the investors were honest. Assumed I would sign. Because I always signed. I always showed up. I always said yes. That was my role. The yes man. The fixer. The one who made things happen so no one else had to worry. I had been playing that role for so long, I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know if I was allowed to stop. I didn't know that stopping would feel like drowning. Until I stopped and realized I had been drowning the whole time. I just hadn't noticed because everyone was clinging to me. And clinging feels like being held. Until you realize you're the only one keeping anyone afloat. And no one is holding you. My father pulled me aside one night. We were in the garage. He was looking for a hammer he didn't need. He said, "This deal. Are you sure about it?" I said, "I'm not sure about anything." He said, "Then why are you doing it?" I said, "Because everyone needs me to." He said, "That's not a reason." I said, "It's the only one I have." He didn't argue. He just looked at me. I remember that look. It was the look of a man who knew what was coming and couldn't stop it. He had been in my position once. The one everyone counted on. The one who said yes until he couldn't anymore. He had survived. Barely. He was watching me make the same mistake. And he couldn't stop me. Because I wasn't ready to stop myself. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being the person everyone needed me to be. I was being none of those things. I was being scared. Scared of disappointing them. Scared of being the one who said no. Scared of finding out that my value to them was exactly equal to what I could provide. I wasn't ready to find out. So I kept saying yes. Kept moving toward the closing table. Kept ignoring the voice in my head that said this isn't right. I was good at ignoring that voice. I had been ignoring it for years. But it was getting louder, and the closing was getting closer. And I was running out of time to listen, or to keep ignoring. I didn't know which one would be harder. I was about to find out. 6 months of due diligence. I hired lawyers, accountants, Investigators. Every report came back with yellow flags. Not red, not stop signs, just caution. The numbers were aggressive. The projections were optimistic. The investors had reputations that didn't quite line up. I asked Marcus about the yellow flags. He said, every deal has risk. That's why the reward is high. I said, this feels different. He said, you're getting cold feet. I said, maybe. Or maybe I'm seeing something you're not. Marcus said, you're the lead. You've done the work. You know the numbers. Don't let fear make your decisions. I said, fear isn't making my decisions. Evidence is. And the evidence says something is off. He said, then walk away. But if you walk away, you're not just walking away from money. You're walking away from your family's future. I said, that's manipulation. He said, that's reality. Your sister is counting on you. Your mother is counting on you. You know that. I didn't know that. That's why I stayed. That's why I almost signed. My sister started sending me lists. Debts, bills, expenses, not asking for help, just showing me what was at stake. She didn't have to ask. I knew what she was doing. She was showing me the cost of my hesitation. She was showing me what I would be responsible for if I walked away. That's not love. That's leverage. I didn't say that to her. I should have. I should have said, I see your debts. I see your fear. But I'm not a bank. I'm your brother. And if this deal fails, I lose everything too. Have you thought about that? She hadn't. She couldn't. She was too deep in her own desperation to see mine. That was the tragedy. Not that she didn't care. That she couldn't afford to care. Because caring about me would have meant admitting that her survival was not my responsibility. And she wasn't ready to do that. She may never be ready. But I was learning. Slowly. Painfully. The cracks were getting wider. The yellow flags were getting darker. And Marcus was getting more insistent. Sign. Sign now. Before someone else backs out. Before the investors get nervous. Before you ruin this for everyone. Everyone. That word again. Everyone. It didn't include me. I was starting to notice. I was the one taking the risk. I was the one doing the work. I was the one who would lose everything if the deal collapsed. But everyone was my sister, my mother, Marcus, the investors, everyone but me. I was not an everyone. I was the tool everyone was using to get what they wanted. And I was letting them. Because I didn't know how to say no. Because I was afraid of what would happen if I did. Because I was trained to believe that my worth was exactly equal to my usefulness. I was about to find out if that was true. I was about to say no. And I was about to see who stayed. I was terrified, but I was also tired. Tired of being the one who carried everything. Tired of being the one who signed. Tired of being the one who said yes, while everyone else said, we're counting on you. I was done counting. I was going to start looking. At the cracks. At the yellow flags. At the faces of the people who loved me only when I was useful. I was going to look, and then I was going to decide. Not yet, but soon. The closing was Tuesday. I had days, not weeks. Days. I could feel the weight of everyone's expectation pressing down on me. I could feel myself starting to crack. Not the deal. Me. I was the one who was going to break. I just didn't know if I would break toward the signing table or away from it. Either way, something was ending. Either way, I was going to be someone different on the other side. I just had to survive the breaking. I didn't know if I could, but I was going to try. I was going to try to say no. To Marcus. To my sister. To the voice in my head that said, you're ruining everything. I was going to try to say no, and I was going to see what happened. I was terrified, but I was also ready. I thought. I hoped. I didn't know, but I was going to find out. The night before the closing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and ran the numbers again. In my head. On paper. On my phone. Every time, the same conclusion. The deal could work, but it could also fail spectacularly. And if it failed, I would be ruined. Not just financially, reputationally, legally. The kind of ruined that didn't have a recovery plan. The kind of ruined that followed you for years. The kind of ruin that your family would not be able to understand because they had never been responsible for anything bigger than a mortgage payment. My sister called at 11 p.m. She said, "Are you nervous?" I said yes. She said, me too, but we're going to be okay. This is going to change everything. She said, we, not you, we, as if her risk was the same as mine, as if her name was on the documents, as if she would be in the room when the lawyers asked questions. She wouldn't be. I would be. Alone. I said, if this goes wrong, I'm the one who takes the fall. Not you. Not Mom. Me. She said, it's not going to go wrong. I said, you don't know that. She said, I believe in you. I said, believing in me doesn't protect me from bad contracts. She said, why are you doing this? Why are you looking for problems? I said, because it's my job. Because no one else is looking. Because if I don't look, no one will. She said, you're going to ruin this. I said, I'm trying to save it, but I'm also trying to see if it's worth saving. She hung up. She didn't say good night. She didn't say I love you. She just hung up. At 3 a.m., I found it. An email buried in the due diligence. A side agreement between Marcus and one of the investors. Something that changed the risk profile completely. Something that should have been disclosed. Something that wasn't. I read it 3 times. Then I printed it. Then I sat in the dark until the sun came up. I called my lawyer at 6 a.m. He read the email. He said, where did you find this? I said, in the documents. Buried. He said, this changes everything. I said, I know. He said, if you sign tomorrow, you're accepting this risk. And this risk is not small. I said, what would you do? He said, I'm not the one whose family is counting on him. I said, that's not an answer. He said, it's the only one I have. I hung up. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to do it. The email was proof, not just of a hidden risk, of a hidden intention. Marcus wasn't just optimistic. He was hiding. And if he was hiding this, what else was he hiding? I didn't want to find out. I wanted to sign. I wanted the deal to be good. I wanted my family to be saved. I wanted to be the hero. But I couldn't unsee what I had seen. The email was in my hand. The risk was real. And the cost of walking away was my family's hope. The cost of signing was everything else. I had to choose. Not between good and bad. Between 2 kinds of bad. One where I lost their love. One where I lost myself. I didn't know which one was worse. I didn't know if I would survive either. But I had to choose. The sun was up. The closing was in 4 hours. I had to choose. 6:15 a.m. I called my sister. She answered on the first ring. She said, are you on your way to the closing? I said, no, I'm not signing. She said, what do you mean you're not signing? I told her about the email, the side agreement, the risk that wasn't disclosed. She said, you're making this up. I said, I'm not. I have the document. She said, so what? Every deal has paperwork. I said, this isn't paperwork. This is fraud. She screamed, you're ruining us. Everyone was counting on you. I'll never forgive you for this. I listened. I didn't argue. I said, I love you. I'm not signing. She said, love doesn't pay my bills. I said, neither will this deal. Not if it goes wrong. And it will go wrong. Because they hid something. And if they hid one thing, they hid others. I can't sign something I know is broken. She said, you don't know it's broken. You're scared. That's all this is. You're scared. I said, I am scared. I'm scared of signing something that will destroy me. And I'm scared of what happens to you if it does. Because if I'm ruined, I can't help you. And you'll be worse off than you are now. She said, you're making excuses. I said, I'm making a decision. The right decision. The hard decision. I'm sorry you can't see that. She hung up. That was the last time we spoke for a long time. I called my mother. She was already crying. My sister had called her. She said, how could you do this to us? I said, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm refusing to do something that would have hurt you. She said, you don't know that. I said, I know enough. I know they hid something. I know I can't trust them. I know signing would have been a mistake. She said, your sister needed this. I said, my sister needed something. This wasn't it. She hung up. She didn't scream. She just hung up. That was worse. My father called at 7 a.m. He said, I heard. I said, I'm sorry. He said, don't be sorry. Be sure. I said, I'm sure. He said, then that's enough. Your mother will come around. Your sister might not. But you're the one who had to sign. Not them. You made the call. That's your right. I said, thank you. He said, don't thank me. Just don't let them make you feel like you did something wrong. You didn't. I hung up. I cried. First time in years. Not because I was sad. Because I was relieved. Someone saw me. Someone understood. Someone didn't ask me to sacrifice myself on the altar of their desperation. My father, the quiet one, the one who never asked for anything. He was the only one who saw. I sat in the dark. The closing was at 10 a.m. I wasn't going. The email was on my desk. The proof that I had made the right call. But proof didn't matter to my sister. Proof didn't matter to my mother. They didn't want proof. They wanted salvation. And they wanted me to provide it. At any cost. Even if the cost was me. I thought about the years I had said yes. The years I had been the one who fixed things. The years I had carried their expectations without complaint. And now, the first time I said no to something that would have destroyed me, they responded with anger. Not concern, not curiosity, just anger. Because I had broken the pattern. I had stopped being the machine that produced their hope. I had become a person with limits. And they didn't know how to love that person. They only knew how to love the machine. The machine that said yes. The machine that signed. The machine that risked everything so they didn't have to. I was done being the machine. I didn't know if they would ever love the person underneath. But I was going to find out. I was going to find out if their love was conditional. On my usefulness. On my willingness to sacrifice. On my yes. I was about to learn the truth. I was terrified, but I was also ready. I had to be. There was no one else to be. I was the only one who could save myself. And saving myself meant letting them be angry. Letting them leave. Letting them think I had ruined everything. I hadn't. I had saved everything that mattered. My integrity. My future. My ability to help them in ways that didn't destroy me. They couldn't see that. Maybe they never would. But I could see it. And that was enough. For now. It had to be. I had nothing else. Just the email. And my father's voice. You didn't do anything wrong. I held on to that. It was the only anchor I had. I held on. The closing came and went. I didn't sign. The deal died. And so did something in my family. I didn't know if it could be resurrected. I didn't know if I wanted it to be. I just knew I was still standing. Still breathing. Still me. The machine was broken. I was not. That was the beginning. Not the end. The beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. But I was going to find it. One day. One no at a time. I was going to find it. My sister didn't speak to me for 8 months. My mother called occasionally. To ask if I'd changed my mind. To ask if the deal could be revived. To ask if I'd found another opportunity to replace the one I'd killed. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked about money. About deals. About rescue. That was the shape of our relationship now. Not mother and son. Supplicant and source. I stopped explaining myself. I'd explained once. I'd shown the email. I'd walked through the numbers. I'd done everything but beg them to understand. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to fix it. And when I couldn't, when I wouldn't, they decided I was the problem. I asked my father, do they hate me? He said, they don't hate you. They hate the situation. And you're the only one they can blame. I said, that's not fair. He said, fair doesn't matter. What matters is you did the right thing. And the right thing is often lonely. I said, how do you know? He said, because I've been the lonely one. When your mother wanted me to take risks I wasn't comfortable with. When your sister wanted me to guarantee loans I couldn't afford. I said no. They were angry. They got over it. Or they didn't. But I kept my peace. And my peace is worth more than their approval. I said, I want both. He said, I know. But you can't always have both. Sometimes you have to choose. I chose peace. I chose myself. It felt terrible. It still felt terrible. But it was mine. The deal died. Marcus disappeared. The investors moved on. The land was sold to someone else. 6 months later, it was in receivership. The new owners lost everything. I saw the news article. I sent it to my sister. She didn't respond. I sent it to my mother. She said, that's terrible for them. Not, you were right. Not, thank you for saving us. Just, that's terrible for them. I didn't expect gratitude. But I didn't expect erasure either. The proof was right there. The deal had been a trap. I had seen it. I had walked away. I had saved them from something they couldn't see, and they couldn't thank me because thanking me would mean admitting they had been wrong. And they weren't ready to admit that. Maybe they never would be. I had to learn to be okay with that. I had to learn that being right wasn't the same as being acknowledged. That truth didn't need witnesses to be true. That my father's quiet approval was enough. That my own knowledge of having done the right thing was enough. It had to be enough, because it was all I had. The silence was loud, but I was learning to sit in it. Not comfortably, but honestly. I was learning to stop waiting for them to see what I saw. They might never see it. That was their loss, not mine. I had my integrity. I had my father. I had the knowledge that I had not signed away my future on a lie. That was worth more than their gratitude. That was worth everything. I just had to keep telling myself that until I believed it. I was getting there. Slowly. One day at a time. One silence at a time. One news article at a time. I was getting there. I stopped waiting for thank you. I stopped waiting for acknowledgement. I stopped waiting for my sister to call and say you were right. She never would. Not because she didn't know. Because knowing would require her to admit that she was wrong to pressure me. And she wasn't ready to do that. Maybe she never would be. My mother asked me a year later, "Do you ever regret it?" I said, "Regret what?" She said, "Walking away." I said, "No. Do you regret asking me to sign something that would have destroyed me?" She said, "I didn't know." I said, "We didn't want to know. There's a difference." She said, "You're so hard on us." I said, "I'm not hard on you. I'm honest. You asked me to risk everything. You didn't ask to see the documents. You didn't ask to understand the risks. You just asked me to sign. And when I said no, because I found something that would have hurt all of us, you stopped talking to me. You chose silence over gratitude. You chose anger over understanding." She said, "You don't know what it was like for us." I said, "You don't know what it was like for me." Sitting in the dark, reading that email, knowing that if I signed, I'd be lying to myself. Knowing that if I walked away, you'd blame me. I chose the blame, because the blame was survivable. The deal wasn't. She didn't answer. She didn't apologize. She just changed the subject. That was the last time we talked about it. My father called. He said, "I saw the article about the land, the receivership." I said, "I know." He said, "You were right." I said, "I know." He said, "I'm sorry no one said it." I said, "You're saying it." He said, "That's not enough." I said, "It's enough from you, because you never asked me to sign. You just watched, and you didn't judge." He said, "I was worried." I said, "I know. That's why your words matter. You were worried about me, not about the money, not about the deal, about me." He said, "Yes." I said, "That's the difference. That's the whole difference." We sat on the phone in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the first comfortable silence I'd had with anyone in my family in months. I thought about the thank you that never came. My sister had needed the money. She had begged me to sign. She had screamed at me when I said no. She had called me selfish. She had told me I was ruining her life. And then the deal collapsed. The new owners lost everything. The land went into receivership. She never said, "You were right." She never said, "Thank you for saving me." She just stopped talking to me. That was her thank you. The silence. The absence. The refusal to acknowledge that I had seen something she couldn't see. My father's thank you was different. It was simple, direct, unafraid. "You were right." That was all. But it was everything. Because it came from someone who had never asked me to carry his weight. Someone who had just watched. Someone who had been worried about me, not about what I could provide. That was the difference. That was the whole difference. I held on to his words. They were small, but they were real. And real was worth more than the silence of everyone else. Real was worth more than the thank you that never came. Real was my father's voice on the phone, saying the words no one else would say. "You were right." That was enough. It had to be. It was. I was learning to be okay with enough. I was learning to be okay with small. I was learning to be okay with the silence of people who couldn't see what I had saved them from. Because I could see it. And my father could see it. That was 2 people. 2 was enough. 2 was a start. 2 was more than I had before. I would take it. I would build on it. I would learn to live with the silence of the rest. One day at a time. One phone call at a time. Well, you were right at a time. I was getting there. Slowly, but I was getting there. 2 years after the deal died, my sister called. She didn't apologize. She said, I have an opportunity. I need you to co-sign a loan. Not can you help me? I need you to co-sign. I said no. She said, you haven't even heard the details. I said, I don't need to hear the details. The answer is no. She said, you're still angry about the deal. I said, I'm not angry. I'm done. There's a difference. She said, I'm your sister. I said, I know. That's why I almost destroyed myself for you. That's why I spent months agonizing over a deal that would have ruined me. That's why I let you scream at me when I made the right call. Because you're my sister. But being your sister doesn't mean I keep putting myself in harm's way, because you won't learn to stand on your own. She said, you're being cruel. I said, I'm being honest. Cruelty would be signing the loan and letting you fail. Honesty is saying no and meaning it. She said, so that's it? You're done. I said, I'm done saying yes to things that hurt me. I'm done being the solution to problems I didn't create. I love you, but I'm done. She hung up. She didn't scream this time. She just hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't apologize. I just sat there, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. The lightness of a no that was final. I called my father. I said no to Elena, to co-signing a loan. He said, how did she take it? I said, she hung up. He said, are you okay? I said, I feel different. Like I just closed the door I didn't know I'd been holding open. He said, doors are meant to close. That's how you know which rooms to stay in. I said, when did you get so wise? He said, when I stopped opening doors that led to rooms I didn't want to be in. I laughed. First time I'd laughed in weeks. It felt like the beginning of something. I didn't talk to my sister for a year. My mother called sometimes. We talked about the weather, about my father's health, about nothing that mattered. She didn't ask for anything. That was the gift of saying no. It taught them that I wasn't an ATM, that I wasn't a safety net, that I was a person, and persons get to choose. My sister called on my birthday. She said, I'm not going to ask you for anything. I just wanted to say happy birthday. I said, thank you. She said, I've been thinking about what you said, about being done. I don't understand it, but I'm trying to respect it. I said, that's all I've ever asked for. She said, I know. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm not apologizing for wanting help. I'm apologizing for not seeing that I was asking you to hurt yourself to give it. I said, thank you. She said, you keep saying thank you. I said, because I don't know what else to say. I'm not ready to say I forgive you, but I'm glad you called. She said, that's enough. We hung up. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a phone call that didn't end in screaming. That was something. I called my father. I said, Elena called. She said, happy birthday. She didn't ask for anything. He said, that's progress. I said, is it? Or is it just a longer pause between requests? He said, you'll find out. That's the thing about boundaries. You have to keep them. Anyone can set a boundary. Keeping it is the work. I said, how do I know if I'm keeping it or just being cruel? He said, cruelty feels good in the moment. Boundaries don't. Boundaries feel like loss. If it felt good, it wasn't a boundary. It was revenge. I said, this doesn't feel good. It just feels necessary. He said, then you're doing it right. I stopped waiting for my sister to thank me for walking away from the deal. I stopped waiting for my mother to acknowledge that I saved them from something worse. I stopped waiting for anyone to see what I saw, because the seeing wasn't for them. It was for me. I saw. I knew. I walked away. That was enough. It had to be enough. It was. The silence didn't become peace. Not exactly, but it became something I could live with. Something that didn't keep me awake at night. Something that let me breathe. That was the gift of the year of no. Not freedom from them. Freedom from needing them to be different. They were who they were. I was who I was. I couldn't change them. I could only change my yes. And I did. One no at a time. One birthday call at a time. One boundary at a time. I was learning. Not quickly. Not perfectly. But I was learning. That was enough. It had to be. It was. 3 years after the deal. My sister called. She said, I have a question. You can say no. I just want to ask. I said, okay. She said, Can I borrow $500? I'll pay you back on Friday. I thought about it. Not about the money. About the pattern. About the last time. About the deal. About the years of yes that nearly broke me. I said no. She said okay. That was it. No screaming. No hanging up. Just okay. She said, "Do you remember the deal? The one I walked away from?" I said yes. She said, "Do you understand why?" I said, "I understand that you thought you were protecting us." I said, "I was protecting us." The land went into receivership. The people who signed lost everything. Everything. I saved us from that. She was quiet. Then she said, "I didn't know that." I said, "I sent you the article. You didn't respond." She said, "I didn't read it. I was too angry." I said, "I know. That's why I'm telling you now. Not to make you feel bad. Just so you know, the thing you wanted me to sign would have destroyed us." And I walked away, and no one ever thanked me. Not once. She said, "Thank you." I said, "It's been 3 years." She said, "I know. I'm sorry it took so long." I said, "Me too. But I needed to hear it. Even now. Even late." She said, "You were right. About the deal. About the loan. About everything. I was drowning, and I wanted you to drown with me, because I didn't want to be alone." I said, "I know." She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Thank you." She said, "Is that enough?" I said, "It's enough for me to start forgiving you. But I'm not there yet." She said, "I'll wait." I sat in my apartment. The phone was quiet. The last time I ever said yes to them was the deal. Not the deal I signed. The deal I walked away from. That was my last yes. The yes of considering them. The yes of caring what they thought. The yes of letting their desperation become my burden. After that, I started saying no to loans, to co-signing, to being the family's emergency fund. I said no, and the world didn't end. Some relationships ended. Some changed. I'm still here, saying no without apology, without fear. The person who needed the deal most never said thank you. Until she did. 3 years late. That thank you was the last thing I needed to hear. Not to forgive her, to forgive myself, for saying yes for so long, for believing that love meant sacrifice. It doesn't. Love means seeing each other, and sometimes seeing each other means saying no. That's where the silence ends. Not with a yes, with a no. The no that was the last yes I ever gave them. The yes of walking away. The yes of saving myself. I stopped. I'm still here. That's the story. Not a hero's journey. Just a person who learned that no is not the end of love. Sometimes it's the beginning. I'm over at where silence ends. What did you finally stop saying yes to people who only saw you as a resource? And what happened after? Tell me about it in the comments.